In the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand. For you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to see the sun. So if a person lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many. All that comes is vanity. God our Father, we thank you for this evening. As we begin our lesson on wisdom literature, send us your Holy Spirit to enlighten us so that, reading your scripture, we may be able to follow you closely. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. So, welcome everybody. I am happy to welcome you all and to take this class on wisdom literature. And I hope this is my first time with you, interacting with you. Or the session will divide into three parts. In the first, we will have the lecture. Then in the second part, we will have the review questions which you have at the end of your lesson. And the third, we will try to see how this program is going. And you have been following 10 lectures, and you can we have a review about the entire thing. So how you benefit, or what is the problem that you encounter in receiving a evaluation or receiving your mail, and those things we'll discuss at the end. So now we begin our lecture. I'll be sharing my screen with you, and I have sent to all the mail IDs the link for the meeting, and some are telling that they have not received, and we will see how we can go about in the next meeting. Good. Please take your lessons, that's lesson 10 on wisdom literature, and I'll be following the lesson material which you have, and I have made a PowerPoint and I will share with you now. Our lesson outline, we divide our lesson into 11 parts. Number 1, introduction and background. Number 2, wisdom movement in Israel. Number 3, aims of the wisdom literature. Number 4, literary forms. Number 5, book of Proverbs. Number 6, the book of Job. Number 7, Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. Number 8, wisdom of Sirach. Number 9, wisdom of Solomon. Number 10, Song of Songs. Message of the books. Here we go. The first one about the introduction and background. When we take our Bible, we classify 5 books as wisdom literature: Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes, Sirach. Sirach is also known as Ecclesiasticus, and Wisdom of Solomon. Some people have Psalms also as part of wisdom literature because of 2 reasons. One, the Psalms which are called didactic Psalms, like Psalm 1, they tell about how to live a good life. And based on that didactic Psalms, some classify or some add wisdom Psalms into wisdom literature. And the second reason is on account of the Torah Psalms. There are some Psalms which the key human dimension is love, and on account of this love, we take Song of Songs also into our wisdom literature corpus. And there are also wisdom portions in the rest of the Bible. For example, in the book of Tobit, we have chapter 4, 3 to 21, There, lot of instructions are given to the son Tobias from his father. And there, what we learn is that for a good living, there are portions allotted to that particular person. So, wisdom literature is found also outside wisdom literature. Then there are some wisdom influences. For example, in Genesis, second and third chapters, we have the fall of humankind story. There, really, what the problem is whether the first parents were choosing wisdom or they were choosing folly. And unfortunately, they had to choose folly, and the original sin came about. And the wisdom influence is seen there as well. And there is a section called Wisdom Apocrypha. For example, it's the story of Ahikar, which has been discovered recently, and this comes under Wisdom Apocrypha. And we have to say wisdom is the property of the world. For example, even in our own country, for example, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a type of wisdom literature. Quran is a type of wisdom literature. So therefore, we have to understand that wisdom is not a property of people. Some of them are Egypt. In Egypt, Onomasticon, that is the encyclopedic collection of wisdom literature, and instruction of Tahote. And these two play a key role in influencing the books of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. And in Mesopotamia, from our lecture on Genesis, we might have heard Epic of Gilgamesh. That's also wisdom literature. And from Greek world, we have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, the so-called wisdom school philosophers. So wisdom is found everywhere. So in the first section, we have understood what are the books in the wisdom literature and how wisdom is found. In section 2, wisdom literature. In our Bible, wisdom literature is divided into two groups. One, canonical or proto-canonical section. There we have 5 books: Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes, Psalms, and Song of Songs. In the deuterocanonical section, we have wisdom of Sirach and wisdom of Solomon. Now we go to see the wisdom movement in Israel. To denote wisdom, Hebrew uses the word Chokmah. Here if you see in the slide, this particular line, Hebrew uses Chokmah, it's in red. And whenever I use in red, that is the review question which you have at the end of your lesson. So you can take note of this. Hebrew word for wisdom is Chokmah. Chokmah is a feminine word, and it also means understanding, insight, knowledge. In Greek, for wisdom, the word used is Sophia. In Latin, sapientia. And the opposite of wisdom is folly. Folly in the sense, in terms of not choosing to be wise. And how Israel brought out wisdom. There are 3 stages as far as the wisdom movement is concerned. The first stage is the folk wisdom that begins before 1020 BC. It's also known as popular wisdom, proverbial wisdom, or gnomic wisdom. Here what happens, there is a blend of intelligence and experience. So people who are intelligent experience the world outside, and they try to make sense of the world, and they try to bring out the wisdom sayings. And their beginning of wisdom is the observation. So they begin from the world outside. For example, we have here in Proverbs 6:6-11, there the author says, go to the ants. So here the author observes how the ants in his own time behave, and from there he tries to get a lesson for his own time. So that's the beginning of folk wisdom. Therefore, we can say the primary school of wisdom is house itself. So every house is the primary school of wisdom. And this particular movement is also called pre-monarchical wisdom. So folk wisdom, popular wisdom,
Cannot hear you, Father.
No disturbance, can't hear you, Father. Your voice is breaking.
Father,
good to hurt one another. So therefore, what we have to do? We have to respect life. So that respecting of life becomes a law. And that's why we have here, we have the law. So laws were once usually, the laws were earlier, they were the wisdom and later they became the law proper. The second stage is royal wisdom. That is from 1020 to 587 BC. This is also known as court wisdom. They had to understand the ways to function or the way to run a government. So to run the government efficiently, they had to set out some rules. And those rules became later the wisdom sayings. For example, Solomon, the traditional patron and the founder of the wisdom movement in Israel, and he seems to be the author of all the wisdom books. For example, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Wisdom of Solomon. These books are attributed to Solomon's authorship. Solomon, when he was
Cannot hear.
Father, voice is breaking.
Father, your voice is breaking. We can't hear you. We cannot follow.
We are not able to follow. Audio.
We cannot hear you, Father.
Father John Baptist, we cannot hear. Audio. We don't see you, we don't hear you. Father,
to show us how
we
the
don't hear you at
people
all.
of
We didn't hear
those
Father.
times
We
were
didn't hear you,
suffering
Father.
on account of the
Father, you can't
presence
hear
of
us.
kings or the loss of kings.
Father, we
So
didn't
now,
hear you from the previous
as I
slide.
proceed, may I just
No, we didn't hear you, Father. You'll have to go
We didn't
back.
hear you
just
from the
I pause
beginning.
for a
back.
moment
We
and
didn't
see
hear
whether
you
things
at
are
all.
okay with you.
No, Father, your crack in between is breaking your voice.
You'll have to go back, Father.
Father,
Hello?
can you please restart from the court wisdom? From that slide, Father?
Yes, from court wisdom.
Your voice was breaking, Father. Sorry about that. None of us were able to hear you. Thank you.
Father, can you hear us, Father? Father, can you hear us?
Hello? Are you able to hear
Father,
me?
Father, please
we
go
can
back.
hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, please go back. We didn't hear you. The earlier
Are
part
you
of the
able to
lesson
hear
we didn't
me?
hear. Now we
Father,
can hear you.
Father, can you go back to court wisdom?
Can anyone answer?
We are answering,
Sister Deepa, are you
Father.
able to hear me?
We are all answering.
Father, we can't hear you.
Sister Mary?
We can't
Father,
hear you, Father.
Okay, good. See, some are putting in the comment that they are not able to hear me.
No, Father, we can't hear you. You're cracking. The voice is cracking.
That may be your problem, I think.
No. All of us in this group can't hear you.
What
Can you
about
go?
other?
Can you go back to quote wisdom, Father? From there we didn't hear you.
Okay.
Father,
Yes,
none of
Father.
us heard
None
you.
of us,
Father, none
none
of
of
us
us
heard
could
you.
hear, Father.
Pardon?
None of us heard you. None of us heard you. Your
Okay.
problem. You are having a connection problem. None of us heard
Excuse.
you.
Okay, I'll check. Okay, shall we resume?
Yes, Father.
Super. And since I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to see the comments. Okay, good.
Father, if you wear a earphone or something, it will be better, I think so, because in between it is going breaking.
Pardon, sister?
If you wear a earphone or something, it will be better, I think. Otherwise, it is in between, it is breaking, Father.
Okay, I'll try. Okay, good. So from quote wisdom, so that section, we were talking about the wisdom in Israel, and the second step is the royal wisdom or court wisdom. So here to run the government effectively, and they had to create some rules and regulations, and that became later the so-called wisdom tradition. That is the second step in royal wisdom. And then let's go to the third one. And the proponent of the royal wisdom is King Solomon. The step 3 is theological wisdom, that is after 587, scribal wisdom or Deuteronomistic or Deuteronomic wisdom. And here the problem was the Babylonian exile. In Babylonian exile, they lost everything. They lost their temple, they lost their law, they lost their identities. So from outside or external identities, they had to look for an internal identity. And their inward movement became a wisdom movement. And in their failure, they realized that on account of their sin against God, they were exiled. So from the movement outside became a movement inside. And they realized that fear of the Lord is the key thing. So they started seeing that fear of the Lord is the beginning of the wisdom. And here, the wisdom, the so-called wise people are called the godly people, and the unwise are ungodly. Good. So that's number 2. Now we go to number 3, aims of wisdom literature. Number 1 is human wisdom. So here, in human wisdom, experience or skill in a particular field was called wisdom. For example, I know carpentry, that is knowledge. And out of knowledge, if I create something, a product, that's a table or a chair, I was a wise person. So primarily in Hebrew literature, human wisdom was considered as skill put into practice. Number 2, divine wisdom, where God is the source of wisdom. And in Sirach 51, 13 and 14, we have, before the temple, I asked for her. In the sense, somebody stays in front of the temple and says that I want wisdom from the Lord. And in the wisdom literature, we have the personification of wisdom. In the sense, wisdom is personified as a person. Here we have two persons. One is lady wisdom, that is wisdom woman, and the opposite is strange woman or a folly woman. So wisdom woman and folly woman. These are two women, and people have to choose one out of these two. And also, when we say personification of wisdom, God also was attributed with wisdom, and wisdom was the prime quality or characteristic of God. Then number 4, life or goal of wisdom. So goal of wisdom is life. So ultimate aim is that people must have life. Life not in terms of life in the next world, but life in the world here and now. For example, when somebody has a faithful wife, husband, obedient children, true friends, riches in plenty, honor, health, and everything together, shalom. So the people who had all these were considered as wise people because they had life here and now. In the wisdom literature, we have metaphors like tree of life, fountain of life, and way of life. So these are the expressions to show about life, or the goal of wisdom is life. Then good and bad conduct. So the wisdom literature also talks about how to be a good person and how not to be a bad person. And number 6, retribution. So retribution, that this will come again is a key theme, and this is also one of your review questions. Are you able to follow me?
Yes, Father.
Yes, Father. Yes, Father.
Okay, are you able to see the presentation as well?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. Okay, because some are sending comments that they are not able to see, and I don't know how to go about. Okay, good. Now, are you able to see my presentation?
Father, all those who are not able to see the presentation, they can end the call and join, then they
Yes,
will be
Father, we can see your presentation, Father, clearly.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. Number 6 is retribution. This is a key thing in wisdom literature. If we understand it, we understand the wisdom literature well. Retribution is simple. If you do good, you will be rewarded. If you do evil, you will be punished. So this is called retribution. But the wisdom literature questions this retribution on account of innocent suffering. For example, I am a good person, I obey the laws, I obey rules and regulations, but I am not performing well in life, or things are not going well with me. And if I flip the entire ground and I see some politicians or some people who are not so good, who take bribe or who enforce violence, and there they are performing well in this life at least. So now the author asked the question, if the law says that if you obey God, you will be blessed. If you don't obey, you will be punished. And why at all there is innocent suffering? And the key theme in the wisdom literature is the retribution theory. Retribution theory, people were not able to make sense of retribution theory, especially Kohelet and Job, we will be seeing shortly. And this more like our law of karma in Hinduism. This doctrine was challenged and rejected by Job and Kohelet, we will see. That's number 3. We go to number 4, literary forms. Literary form is a sense how this particular wisdom is given. For example, we have medicine. This medicine can be given in different forms, as injection, as a capsule, as a tablet, or as a syrup. So medicine is same, but the form is different. In the same way, wisdom literature is same, but the forms are different. So we are going to now look at how different wisdom forms are being used in the wisdom literature. First of all, the wisdom literature is the major part is in poetry, as in poem. Wisdom book is primarily poetry. And poetry in the sense with parallelism. So we have three key parallelism: synonymous parallelism, antithetical parallelism, and synthetic parallelism. So let's just have a look at synonymous parallelism. Somebody will read for me, maybe Sister Deepa, Proverbs 4:11. Will you please read? Or somebody who has the Bible with you, Proverbs 4:11. Okay, otherwise I read for you. In 4:11 it reads, I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. So here if you see, the first colon, that's the first line, is repeated in the second. So that is called synonymous parallelism. In the second one, it is antithetical parallelism. It's opposite. The first line is contradicted. For example, in Proverbs 10:20. Synthetic parallelism is there is a mutual blend of the first line and the second line. That's called synthetic parallelism. And there are also wisdom and wisdom treatises. Treatise in the sense like an essay. The wisdom things are given. Then we have mashal wisdom. Mashal means simply to be like, analogy or comparison. So here we have all the maxim, that is simile, metaphor, allegory, parable, riddle, paradox, numerical saying. So these are examples for mashal wisdom. Then number two, we have wisdom discourse, where there is an autobiographical narrative, like some people, for example, in the book of Ecclesiastes we have. So the author tells about his own experience of life. That is autobiographical narrative. And we have prayers, hymns, laments, didactic poems, dialogues, and discourses. So this is a second group of form of wisdom literature. So these two groups we have. Number one is like Mashal, that is the major book of Proverbs, and wisdom discourse. Now this is the background to the entire wisdom literature. So from section 1 to section 4. Now we go to book by book. From the first book we are taking book of Proverbs. So now I pause for a moment. If you have any doubt, you may ask from this section. Now if you have any doubt, you may ask your doubts on what we have seen so far. We have just covered the first section where we have given the background information to the wisdom literature. If you have any doubt, you may ask. No doubt?
I did not hear your voice, Father, actually.
Okay, at least those who have
clear.
heard can ask. Hello? Yeah, someone has asked a question about retribution. Does it hold good? It's a very difficult question. That's a real problem actually with Kohelet and Job. They are not able to make sense of it, because in the world we see today, things don't happen in the way things have to happen. So in that case, that we are not able to still hold on to this retribution theory. And the Deuteronomistic theology, it was keenly focusing on wisdom on the retribution. So now we need to rework it. Any other doubt? Okay, so if you are not able to hear my voice or see the presentation, kindly log out and again log in. Okay, good. So now let me continue. So after a while, we'll have a break of 10 minutes. Now we go to see the book of Proverbs. In Hebrew, this particular book is known as Mashal. There are 7 titles for this book: Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, Proverbs of Solomon, words of the wise, etc. And the scholars have recently found parallels between Proverbs 22:17 to 24:22 and the instruction of Amana Mopeb. So here now lots of studies are being done on this. So what does it show? It shows that the biblical literature had external influence. So the other literature also could influence biblical literature. The structure, the book can be divided into 7 from introduction to conclusion. Proverbs of Solomon, collection 1, then Proverbs of Solomon, collection 2, words of Agur, and words of King Lemuel. The historical context is exilic and post-exilic periods, where people had to experience uncertainty and confusion. And there was crisis of identity internally, and externally there were unjust exploitative economic and political structures. And people had to find out how the ways to live amidst these internal and external problems, and they create the proverbs. The proverb is actually a mixture of popular wisdom, court wisdom, royal wisdom, and there is no central theme as we have in the book of Job. In the book of Job, suffering is the central theme. In the book of Ecclesiastes, meaning is the central theme. But here we don't have anything that type. And the scope. So what is the aim of the book of Proverbs is? In the title we have fear of the Lord. So to initiate into the reader, the fear of the Lord is the scope or the aim of the book of Proverbs. And in book of Proverbs, we have a famous section that is wisdom's role in creation. Wisdom's role in creation. So many voices are heard here. Parents, teachers, sages, kings. And one major voice is a wisdom woman's voice. And the woman of worth at the end. That we have in Proverbs 31. That poem is called an acrostic poem. Acrostic poem or acrostic hymn, this we will have in Psalms also. So what does it mean? It means the poem is written in an alphabetical order, like Aleph, Bet, Gimel. So Hebrew alphabets are taken, and according to those alphabets, this poem is written. And why do they do? One, to remember, because it's a earlier we must remember before the Bible came to be. The Bible had a oral. Hello. So they had to have this acrostic pattern, alphabetical pattern, so that they were able to remember everything. So to make them remember, they had to arrange this way. Then creation theme in Proverbs 8:22 to 31. We have wisdom existed prior to creation. So this is another key thing here. And here in your review question, you have wisdom theology is what theology? Creation theology, liberation theology, or oriental theology? The answer is creation theology. That is number 5. So we have just discussed book of Proverbs. You remember the word mashal, then no central theme, and it's a mixture of all the three wisdoms: folk wisdom, royal wisdom, and theological wisdom. And the aim, the scope is to make somebody realize the fear of the Lord as the beginning of wisdom. Are you with me? Good. Now we go to number 6, the book of Job. Wisdom reflections start from experience. This we have told already. And here the major experience or universal experience is human suffering. The book of Job deals with this universal human suffering. It's an eternal problem which is not so easily dismissed. That is the innocent suffering. That is when individuals or even whole populations undergo suffering for no apparent reason. For example, a genocide happening, or in Nazi concentration camp, people were killed as a group, and even people are being persecuted in many places on account of their faith, on account of their right, or on account of their religion. So these things here, we are not able to justify this innocent suffering. Even the COVID-19 pandemic situation also has created this innocent suffering. For no reason of ours, we had to lock ourselves down in our own houses, lockdown, because the government didn't control it, or the nations were selfish, or the nations were exploitive, and still we are not able to make sense of it. For example, after the vaccine has been invented, and still we are not able to control, means either is the politics being played or really the pandemic spreading, we don't know. Here, the innocent people are suffering for no reasons. So book of Job actually asks this question: why at all we have to suffer for something that I didn't do at all? If I have done something, I can incur. For example, I murder a person and I incur a punishment. So there, that punishment is on account of my evil deed. But this particular virus or particular suffering, why should I have even when I don't when I have not done anything at all. So this is innocent suffering. It also talks about questions the existence of God. How can an all-loving God, all-powerful God allow suffering? Or where is God when human beings suffer? Is God a sadist? So these questions are being asked today on account of innocent suffering. All religions have attempted to solve it, but we are not able to solve. And we call it not a problem, but a mystery, because we are part of this particular event or particular reality. And this particular explanation is called, in theology or in philosophy, theodicy. So this word simply means defending God. And Job, how does the book Job defend God? Job tells that suffering is representative of human agony. So it's a part of human agony, and all human beings undergo this, and God is not necessarily, God can't do anything. So here the book of Job asks these questions like, why at all there is suffering? Retribution theology, is it a failure? Is not God just, or is God a sadist? And this book has been influenced by other literature also. For example, here we have the book that's called Dispute Over Suicide. Here the person says, death in my sight today, like the odor of myrrh, like sitting under an awning on a breezy day. Death is in my sight today, like the longing of a man to see his house again after he has spent many years held in captivity. So this type of word pictures or metaphors are found in the book of Job as well. So what does it mean? It simply means that the question is raised everywhere in the world on suffering. There is suffering in the world. The cause of the suffering is desire. The end of suffering is possible. This is the eightfold path that frees us from suffering. So this was the insight by Gautama the Buddha. And suffering on account of commitment to the truth, like Jesus of Nazareth had to suffer, Harichandra had to suffer. So all people, blameless and upright, they had to suffer because of their option for truth. This we are not able to still make sense. And how do we divide the book? The book can be divided as follows. 42 chapters are there in the book of Job: prologue, dialogues, epilogue. So prologue is in prose form, dialogues in poetry form, epilogue is again in prose form, and there is a sandwich structure. Sandwich structure is that something is in the middle, dialogue is in the middle, prologue and epilogue they are acting like a breads in the sandwich, or it's also called the technique of inclusio. And if we see the portrayal of Job in art, we can see the pictures you have here, how Job is alienated and completely isolated, and his friends are there without talking. And later when they begin to talk, they in fact talk about retribution theology. We'll see shortly. Then number two, historical context. They say the book of Job emerged in pre-Mosaic times. That's even before Moses. And some people say it's a post-exilic invention from 538 to 400 BC. And this book reflects severe economic crisis, taxation, question of God's justice and innocent suffering. And people had to make sense, or people had to suffer on account of taxation, and even they had to sell their own children. So Job encounters all the losses, like his cattle is gone, his workers are destroyed, his family members, his daughters, his sons, his property, everything is gone. So more or less it reflects how people had to give up everything to encounter or to live a good life on account of heavy taxation. And Job comes across as a model of faith and fidelity. However, there are inconsistencies within the person of Job. For example, in some places, he is very aggressive against God. In some places, he is very submissive. In a few places, he is very assertive, and we are not able to have a consistent picture of portrayal. So what does it imply? It implies that amidst suffering, we are not able to be consistent. So sometimes we accept suffering, sometimes we are aggressive about suffering. So this is our day-to-day experience as well. And two major characters here in the book are Job and God. Now we'll see the characterization of Job, then we'll see the characterization of God. So this is the question which you have in at the end of the lesson. So this you may follow closely. How is Job portrayed? This first is introduced as a blameless and upright person one who feared God and turned away from evil. So here, he is blameless and he is upright. With these two words, Job is introduced. Though he is blameless, though he is upright, his world begins to crumble. He is reduced to utter or abject poverty, deprived of children, stricken with a deadly disease, unbearable physical suffering, isolated from the community, silent for 7 days, and then he begins to lament. So here, isolated from the community, we can say a kind of alienation. So he is alienated from himself, from his relatives and friends, even from God. So that ultimate alienation he feels, and that makes him lament over what has happened. The friends, the first three friends come, then the fourth one, he comes. The three friends, what they do, when they try to console him, they hold on to the law of retribution. So they say Job might have sinned, and only on account of his sin, he is suffering. So in their eyes, he could only be classified as a hypocrite and a secret sinner. This is the main burden of their argument, which runs through the 3 rounds of speeches and counter speeches. So we have 3 rounds of speeches and counter speeches. In all this, we have Job, the friends are telling that Job is a hypocrite. But Eliphaz attacks his integrity and accuses him of serious and heinous crimes, which include economic abuse of the poor, refusal to help the afflicted, and lack of compassion for the bereaved. So these are the accusations leveled against Job. Job's culture placed great emphasis on honor. So Job could not tolerate this because this was against honor. Job describes his social conscience and commitment to justice as putting on righteousness and justice like a garment. So he tells that he was a person of righteousness. And finally, Job proudly challenges God as well. So this is the characterization of Job. Now we will try to see how God is characterized. God dominates the entire book because it is he in the court when the accuser comes, that the devil comes, he allows. So God dominates the entire book from the beginning. It deals with a critical question. What kind of God is he that allows the innocent to suffer? So this question is raised. So what kind of God is he? Is he really good? If he is good, why does he allow suffering? That's the question. A double exploration of his character, that is the dialogue, depicts God as humans see him, and the theologue depicts God as he sees himself. That's theologue in the sense God talks. So here 2 streams are there. From here, that's from below and from above, we can say. From below, if we look, God seems to be an omnipotent God. But from above, if he looks, he is omnipotent, but he has his reasons for what he does. So God of Job is not just any deity. And here, when he deals with God, it develops in 3 places. That first one, there is a cosmic tour where God tells about his creation. Then he tells about the wild animals. Then he tells about Behemoth and Leviathan. And he tells, where were you when the world was created? Or who did this or who did that? So by encountering Job with these questions, God wants to tell in a way that he is omnipotent and he cannot be perceived. And the first section will conclude with this identity of the character of Job. So suppose today we have to write the person of Job. He can be seen as a perfect person. He's very scrupulous in the sense he even offers sacrifices for his children, even if they have not sinned. So such a scrupulosity he had. So means he really wanted to be a perfect individual. Then he's also pampered servant. So this is the accusation by the devil. And he's a disinterested believer, self-centered observer, God's guinea pig, universal sufferer, patient sufferer, and blind sinner, investigator of good and evil. So these are the portrayals of, or this is the identity of Job, we can say. So what are the lessons we can learn? One, there is a limit for everything, and we can't know beyond this limit. Second, wisdom begins when we know the limit, and we have to accept the suffering and accept the suffering ones. So that is the lesson we get from the book of Job. So now we pause for a moment. We have come up to section 6. that is Book of Proverbs and Book of Job. Now I pause for a moment for you to ask question, or maybe just we can have a 5 minutes break, then we will resume. Is it okay with you?
Yes, Father.
Good. Now it's 4:51. We'll again, you don't log out, okay? If you log out and I have a problem logging you in because I am on the other slide. Okay, good. So just maybe you can Torah. That is, if you are good at Torah or if you obey the law, you will be blessed. And what will be the blessing? Friendship will be a blessing. Relationship will be a blessing. Then duties towards the poor. That's your good life will be a blessing. Health will be a blessing. Then again, there are other themes like almsgiving, table manners, etc. So these things were emphasized actually in the Torah. So this question you have in your review, why or what is the meaning of Torah wisdom? So Torah wisdom is found in Book of Sirach. What is the meaning? So the Torah tells all these good works in the sense charitable works. And these charitable works are emphasized in the Book of Sirach. And on account of this, we call this book as a Torah wisdom. And the book has two beautiful sections. Section 1 is chapter 1, origin of wisdom. So origin of wisdom is God is the origin of wisdom. And there is a praise of wisdom. In 24:1 to 33, God praises, the author praises the wisdom. Then in the next section, we have praise of the ancestors. Sirach 41:1 to 50:21. Here the most unified and cohesive part of the book is this. It reviews the history of Israel through the stories of its great heroes of the past. 12 categories are there, 30 heroes are there. And the author beautifully talks about these heroes, how they had a key role to play in the history of salvation. Then Ben Sira weaves together three major streams of tradition: the prophetic tradition, priestly tradition, and the wisdom tradition. And he has created a new theological synthesis, we can call it. Then we go to the next book, Wisdom of Solomon. Wisdom of Solomon combines traditional Jewish faith with Greek concepts and modes of expression. It must have been written directly in Greek by a Jew born and brought up outside Palestine, not probably or most probably in Alexandria. So here Jew writes from Alexandria. This book can be structured under three headings: Book of Eschatology, Book of Lady Wisdom, Book of History. The historical context is Alexander the Great, again Hellenization. Here many Jews gave up their Jewish identity and embraced Greek ways or Greek worship. And the author wanted to say that we have a Jewish identity and we need to return to that Jewish identity. The author, this book must have been written in about 50 BC, that is just 50 years before Jesus' birth. So very recent book for Jesus. This is the last Old Testament book, and it's under the Deuterocanonical books, which means the book was written in Greek. Then we'll discuss one by one. Book of Eschatology. Here, the righteous versus the wicked. So here, the righteous versus the wicked. Who are those righteous? Who are those wicked people? They are not necessarily the ethically righteous people or the ethically wicked people. No. Those who are righteous are those who embraced Jewish way. The wicked are those who embraced Greek way. So we need to understand righteousness is mentioned not in terms of ethicality or not in terms of ethics or morality, but in terms of your choice. Choice to be with the Jews or with the Greeks. So the righteous choose to remain with the Jewish identity. But what happens is the Greeks dominate the Jews, and naturally they call it the wicked dominate the righteous. So the righteous die. So what will happen to the righteous? And the author of the book tells, there is life after death, immortality of the soul. This particular concept emerges in the Jewish mind when they were in exile. Only in the exile they see that life after death. Before that, there is no life after death. For example, in the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, there is no mention about life after death. Especially it tells that everybody has the same fate, whether a dog or a bird or a human person. Everybody has to encounter the same end. There is no life after death in Ecclesiastes. But only in the wisdom of Solomon, we have this principle of life after death. And that emerges maybe because of Greek influence. Because for the Greeks, the Greek school of philosophy, the soul was immortal. So soul was immortal in the sense body dies and soul remains immortal, and soul will continue to live forever, maybe in this world or in the next world. And the wicked have to be punished, and the wicked will be punished here or there in the sense next world. We have a famous text that's the wisdom of Solomon 3:1-6 that we have in every funeral. Almost our Christian funeral have this first reading, that is, all the souls of the righteous are in the hands of God. And it's a very beautiful text. Here the author tells, he visualizes how the righteous person who after death enter into God's paradise, and they enjoy God's vision or God's beatific vision. So that's the book which talks positively about death is the wisdom of Solomon. Then we go to the next section, Book of Lady Wisdom. The immortality promised to the righteous is grounded in their right relationship with God. Union with the Lady Wisdom is the only way to ensure perfect communion with God. So everybody wanted to be in perfect communion with God, and that perfect communion is possible only through wisdom. Wisdom's association with God in his work as creator and savior is explained by means of a prose litany celebrating the mighty deeds of Isis, the Egyptian goddess of wisdom. So we have an influence from Egyptian wisdom in the wisdom of Solomon. Here, the book talks about wisdom in Israelite history. Then the third part of the book of history. This part consists of the reflection on the Exodus story and a polemic against idolatry. So two things are there. It recalls to them the Exodus story, especially the plague story. In the last line, if you see, wisdom 11-19, we have all the plagues are mentioned here, and there the author talks about this. The author talks in the sense how people who experienced God's providence amidst plague. So by recalling to their mind, he tells them that our God is a God of providence. Then the author follows the Midrashic style and makes use of 7 contrasts. Okay. Then the last book, that is Song of Songs, Canticle of Canticles. Now I pause for a moment. Do you have any doubt on this? So after the pause, we have seen Kohelet and we have seen Wisdom of Solomon. We are going to see now Song of Songs. So if a PowerPoint is not visible, please log out and log in and you will be able to see the PowerPoint. Any doubt you would like to clarify at this point? Okay, good. I continue. This is the last book, Song of Songs. Song of Songs, this is also known as Canticle of Canticles. So it's actually a love poetry, anthology of love songs sung during the marriage celebrations in Jewish times. Collected in the 4th century BC, many say it's a Solomonic composition because we know from the Bible that Solomon composed about 1,500 songs. So these songs might have been from that collection or composition. Love lyric is universal and parallels in other literature are possible. So people have identified very many parallelism. So with this one, the songs of Khalil Gibran and in Tamil literature also. So many studies have been done on this. The overview. There is an expression of emotion, of longing, devotion, and adoration in love. So in love, two persons are there. So one person longs for the other, and in that longing, he or she devotes to the other person and adores the other person's beauty. And there is a passionate tone. So the tone is very passionate, and we need to understand it from human emotions point of view. Then dramatic poem, like there is a setting and there are characters, there are different scenes, and different people act differently. And the key theme is love that we have in 8:6. This particular text we have in our matrimonial celebrations, our marriage, wedding celebrations, we have the reading from this particular book. The theme here, one metaphor is very beautiful. Love is as strong as death, in the sense you can't escape from love. So that is the theme of this particular Song of Songs. So love remains despite interference, separation, and beating. Its intensity never diminishes. That's the beauty of love according to this book. And there are three speakers in the Song of Songs. One is woman, another one is man, and another one is chorus. So whenever there is chorus, there is a change in the character, or there is a change in the speaker. So the author beautifully has put the songs together. So first a woman will speak, then chorus will be there, then again man will speak, then chorus will be there. So that way, that's how the book develops. The themes in the Song of Songs, if we see, we can have these themes. One is love, that's the key theme. And pastoral images. So here, the persons are shown as workers. So here, this is very important. Oftentimes, we feel that love is important, not work. So even in marriage, we say that I love you, which means even my work is not important. No, work is equally important, because you can't satisfy your stomach just by kissing your partner. You need to have money, and money comes on account of your work. And here, the poems very beautifully say that these two lovers, the lady love and the lover, they are the workers, the pastors. So they take care of the sheep, or they are the shepherds, which means they were involved in the work. So work plus love, they make a human person, not necessarily the love. And there are also references to royalty, or about the kings. Then the theme of night and sleep, and many questions are there. Do you know him? Do you know me? So the questions are there. Then many imageries are there, especially to picturize, or to about the human body, about human breasts, and about the male physique or the female physique. So in all these cases, we have different metaphors. Then there is a vineyard of Solomon, and there are some isolated statements. These are some themes we see in the Bible. Now, if you look at the picture, so these two pictures, which suppose we take the pictures literally, what will be the meaning? So a woman or a girl will be like this. For example, here in the second picture, which is in the square, if you see the eyes, so the eyes are like doves or pigeons. If you take literally, so it will be like this. But here, these things we should never take literally, but they are. And if you see at the picture left, you have the tower. So the neck as a tower of ivory, or the tower of David. And here, what does it mean? It simply means that a long neck again, it's a physical implication, is sexual attraction. So here we need to take this as not as a literal sense, but as a metaphorical sense. So therefore, here when you see this particular Song of Songs, whenever you encounter a metaphor, you must remember the metaphors are not to be taken literally, but they are to be taken metaphorically. Very good. So this is very important, because oftentimes we tend to think that the metaphors have to be taken literally, and even many passages are being taken literally, and we land up in many problems. So just have a little caution when you interpret. I hope you are with me. Now, how do we interpret the Song of Songs? So this is also one of your review questions. So this particular book can be interpreted in three ways. Number one, the book talks about the covenant between Yahweh and Israel. That's the covenant between the God of Israel and the people of Israel, as we have in Isaiah and as we have in Hosea. There, the covenant metaphor is very strong. And many people say this particular book, Song of Songs, tells about the relationship between God and people of Israel. And some Christians, they say the songs represent the spousal love between Christ and the church. That's in Ephesians 5:21-24. Some people say they express mystical love between Christ and soul. For example, we have for our feast of Mary Magdalene, we have reading, in fact, from Song of Songs. And many of these Song of Songs are referred to in John of the Cross writings and Teresa of Avila. And there, Teresa of Avila, for example, in the darkness of the dark night of the soul, she tells the dark night of the soul, or the in her own autobiography, she tells how the mystical union is referred in terms of husband and wife relationship. So the more or less the expressions are taken from the Song of Songs. And four possible genres we can see. One, D, another one, collage, then love notes, then an elaborate royal wedding. And what is the theology of the book of Song of Songs? First of all, you need to understand there is no reference to God in the book of Song of Songs. There is absence of God, but still the book has a key role in the canon. Anthropology, if you take from anthropological point of view, it talks about body, theology of the body. So it celebrates body. Oftentimes we see body is negative, body is evil, but body is not evil. Body with its sexuality or with its corporeality, with its tiredness, everything has to be celebrated. So that is the key contribution of the Song of Songs. Then also some people say the Song of Songs refers to Genesis story of the relationship between Adam and Eve. So where how the humans were attracted to each other, that attraction is being portrayed here. Some say the book talks about the covenant relationship between people and God. And some say the book talks about work. So this is the theology of the book. Now we go to the last section, that is theology and message. First one, the theology message lessons of the entire wisdom literature. So we have seen 6 books excluding Psalms. So in these 6 books, what is the theology? In the sense, what do they tell about God? That's what we are going to see. Number 1, practical wisdom, retribution. So first you remember retribution. Good brings good, evil brings evil. God is the author of life, but how do we justify innocent suffering? So that's the first theological question which is raised in the wisdom literature. Number 1, retribution. Number 2, creation. Wisdom theology is equal to creation theology. There are other theologies like covenant theology. Covenant theology, where does it go back? It goes back to Noahic covenant, or Abrahamic covenant, or Sinai covenant, or Davidic covenant. But wisdom literature does not go back to covenant, but it goes back to creation, because wisdom literature is the property of the entire world, not of the Jewish persons or Israelites. So that's why we have a universal outlook, therefore it goes to creation. Then animals are given as examples for human living. So here, even we can learn from environment. For example, ants. Look at the ants, the author tells in the book of Proverbs. So what does it mean? It implies that environment plays a role in the human person. And to make sense of what is going on in the environment, observation is the must. So humans are part of the environment. Number 3, personification of wisdom. So wisdom is personified as Lady Wisdom, and also as the person or somebody who is part of God himself, or God's self. So that's a personification of wisdom. That's the third theological point. Number 4, wisdom experiences. So human person is the starting point of the wisdom, and their day-to-day life experiences play a key role. And in the day-to-day life experiences, what is the scope is to know the truth. Number 5, wisdom and moral action. Two-way theology. I have to choose the right way. That is the way to life. That is number 5. Number 6, wisdom and skepticism. In the sense, we can't know everything in the world. That we must accept. We can't know why innocent suffering is there. We can't know why the innocent people die. Or we can't know why God allows suffering. So we can't answer. So in wisdom, we understand there is also an element of skepticism. And how do we overcome that skepticism? By surrendering to God. So when we surrender to God, we come out of skepticism. Then number 7, wisdom and immortality. So wisdom and immortality in the sense that the aim of wisdom is life, and life not only here but life after. That life after death we have in wisdom of Solomon, and that is union with God. So let me conclude. Wisdom was active even in Jesus' time. For example, Sermon on the Mount. There we have a wisdom reading. So the entire Sermon on the Mount is actually the wisdom book in the New Testament. Then instructions of Paul and John. For example, in Corinthians, in the letter to the Hebrews by its author, there are very many instructions on day-to-day living. For example, in letter to the Romans, it's a very beautiful example. Chapter 12, how love should be genuine. So he continues with some practical guidelines for daily Christian living. So those instructions also will come under wisdom literature. Then Christological hymns, as we have in Colossians, as we have in Philippians. So those hymns tell actually, in fact, about how Paul was making use of the wisdom construct, that is metaphors to tell about God. Then Epistle of James is called as a wisdom literature in the New Testament. Good. So that concludes our lecture. So that we have seen 2 parts. In the first part, we are given the background information. In the second part, we have explained 6 books. That is Book of Proverbs, Book of Job, Kohelet, Wisdom of Solomon, then Wisdom of Sirach, then finally Song of Songs. Now we go to the review questions which you have at the end of your lessons. We have 2 parts. The first one is we have 2 parts. So you can just have a look at it. You can look at the answers. Number 1, the English term wisdom comes from the Hebrew term. Answer is C, Chokmah. So for number 1, English term wisdom comes from the Hebrew term C, Chokmah. Then number 2, folk wisdom is also known as, answer is B, popular wisdom. So the other name for folk wisdom is popular wisdom. Then number 3, the primary school of wisdom means from where wisdom begins. That is, answer is number C, house itself. So we have said house is the beginning of, because in house, ordinary day-to-day experiences, we begin to be persons of wisdom. So house is the beginning, or house is the primary school. Then number 4, goal of wisdom is life. Okay, not necessarily life after death, but simply life. Then Kohelet was written by, often it was thought that Solomon wrote it, but it's not Solomon. It was written by person unknown. So the answer is C, person unknown. Then 6, Sirach was originally written in Hebrew. Though it is a Greek, it was a Greek translation, but originally written in Hebrew. And this Hebrew text we have found after the Qumran excavation that you might have heard from the introduction to the Bible. So what is Qumran? Qumran is a cave where after 1947, excavations have been going on and very many manuscripts have been found. And one of those Hebrew manuscripts is Sirach. Then number 7, wisdom theology also has a name as creation theology. So wisdom theology, the other name is creation theology. Then number 8, the only book in the Old Testament that deals with the death positively is the Wisdom of Solomon. So here, Wisdom of Solomon talks positively. Then number 9, wisdom is the property of the sea, whole world, because it's not exclusively a property of the Jewish mind, but it's of the entire nation. Then finally 10, Kohelet means a collector. So this is the first section. We go to the second section now. Answer in paragraph. That is 6 questions are there. Explain the doctrine of retribution. So this you have in the introduction, and also you have in Job. So what is retribution? Retribution simply means if you do good, you will be blessed. If you do evil, you will be cursed. But this is the retribution. But it means God retributes, He returns. But this particular doctrine is questioned in Job and in Kohelet. Then number 2, how is Job portrayed? So there you have answer in characterization of Job. So in that section, you see how Job is a inconsistent person. At times he's very patient, at times he's very submissive, and he interacts with God. At times he's very aggressive, and his fortunes are returned in the end. So this is how Job is portrayed. Then what do you mean by Torah wisdom? This you have the answer in Sirach. In Sirach, the particular term comes Torah wisdom because the wisdom of Sirach actually talks about the Torah in the sense Torah's all the demands or the rules and regulations of Torah are put in different form in Sirach. That's Torah wisdom. Then write important features of the wisdom theology that we discussed very recently, like retribution, then personification. These are features of wisdom theology. And what is the destiny of humankind according to the book of wisdom of Solomon? So destiny of humankind is immortality, life after death, that you have in wisdom of Solomon. The last one, how to interpret the Song of Songs? Three things. Number one, as the covenant. Number two, as the relationship between the church and the Christ. And number three, as the relationship between Christ and the mystical soul. So that's how we interpret the Song of Songs. So these are the review questions which you have at the end of your lesson. So we have done number one, we have done number two. If you have any doubt, you may ask. I stop the presentation.